Hey everyone, and welcome to the Stretch Goal Reveal Twitch stream. With me tonight is Julian and Jen. We're really excited. I know it's been a while in anticipation trying to get all the stretch goals lined up, and we're really happy that we can share with you not only what the new ones are, but hopefully future ones that will yet to be unlocked. And with that, I think we'll just dive right in. There are going to be some discussions. We're going to try to go over each stretch goal and in order, talk a little bit more about the details of what you might be seeing with stretch goals. Some of these are still, going to be finalized as we go forward with, the writing and things like that. But we'll talk, and Julian and Jen can certainly share their thoughts and excitement as well. So with that, I think, do we have the first stretch goal showing in the reveal section? So what we'll do is we'll go one by one and we will talk about them and move on to the next one. With that, I think we are at the $30,000 level. Cleared in the first maybe 10 minutes, I don't know, the Kickstarter or something like that. The first stretch goal is for 3 more spells for DCC Dying Earth. There's already, I think what we counted, 49 spells, including the 12 patron spells. So this will add another 3. These will be a mixture of, divine, arcane, we're kind of finalizing those, but there were some spells that we didn't get to, that we wanted to, we have, basically advancing spells that were referenced in the books that we want to write out. That includes, I think, the spell of 100 centuries, the spell of internal solitude, and the spell of brain pullulations. So those are spells that we're looking at for that first stretch goal. Anything, Julian or Jen, that you want to say about that? More spells is good.
More spells is definitely good. That's one of the things as a judge and a player that I especially look forward to.
Cool. All right, on to the $40,000 level, and more spells was cleared. The next 3 spells, this will add a total of 6 new spells to the Kickstarter exclusives. We're looking at the spell of compressions from 7 directions, the spell of effective blue havoc, and the web of impermeability. Again, all these are things that, we're going to be taking our own DCC Dying Earth spin on them. They're going to, obviously have a lot of results, just like any DCC spell, but it'll be hopefully fun in the same vein as the other spells that are part of the Kickstarter.
I love the fact that so many spells are based on the shifting of colors based on the magician's mood.
Yeah. And we have a lot of, I think all these spells, Julian, if I remember correctly, most of the spells that we had written up were very small details that we could go from, and we had a lot of latitude in creating the magic in the system. So these are sort of similar, there's a title and it's inspiration, but we're going to be building on that, just like we did with the original spells.
Yep. I pretty much agree. You sort of extrapolate the advancedness out from whatever gems you have in the text.
All right, moving on to the next stretch goal. Already cleared 50,000. This is more curses. So one of the neat things that we hope to bring to the gaming tables is an expansion of the curses that are part of the DCC core book. And so we wrote a number of new curses in the Vancian vein that are also, you can use them in a general setting, but the witch class in particular is the one that uses and casts curses for DCC Dying Earth characters. And so we're looking at adding even more curses, which will be the way we did it in our original writing is that there were obviously some that we tied directly from the books, but then we also had sort of like a fun writing assignment, which was, all the writers my task to them was write your best curse, regardless of, system, regardless of, what it is. And we came back with some really fun ones that were sort of our own self creations. And that's what we're thinking about doing for these, because we sort of exhausted all the curses in the Vancian, but, adding just yet more unique curses from the author's point of view would be great. All right. Moving on to stretch goal number 60,000 or 60K, more patrons. There are 4 patrons in the core book, including 3 patron spells for each of those patrons. So that's where we got 12 patron spells. We're looking at adding additional patrons for this one. The two top vote getters in my mind that we didn't stat out are the Mirth, who is the kind of the witch sorceress character, or that's in the books that fought in the war of the wizards and witches, and so she's a kind of patron-like entity that we wanted to stat out, and that also is could be useful for witches when they're getting into pact entities. And then we also thought it would be really fun for at least one of the other ones, and we're still defining like how many patrons there'll be, but would be Magnets, which is the creature that erupted from that was trapped in the Lake Vol and then got released, and we thought that would be a really cool patron to stat out as well. And so we're looking at those two for sure, and then seeing how many more we can get with that as well. Anything on patrons, Julian or Jen, from your writing or your editing and reading this material?
No, I think patrons are these are full. I would just make sure people understand these are Cesarcon style patrons, not OBTQ type patrons, if you know what I mean. Like they are full on all three, like spells plus patron taint and invoke patron taint. What am I missing? There's one more thing.
Spellburn?
Yeah, there's Spellburn table.
Ironically, Julian, you're missing Spellburn.
Oh. That's why I'm always late. I was blanking because I saw a question in the Twitch chat about do witches have to be female? And
absolutely not.
No, there is absolutely no gender assumption about the witch class, the witches themselves, or that they even have a gender or anything else. So
in fact, last weekend I had a male player pull it off better than I probably ever could. It was perfect.
Yes.
As far as additional patrons, I gotta say I kind of had my heart set on Yukanu, the Laughing Magician. I thought he could be a really fun patron, almost along the lines of like Ningobble in Lankmar, the way that he just uses others to meet his own ends.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rich characters, especially ones that we could use and leverage as patrons. But like Julian said, these are going to be full-on patrons, including the full 3 patron spells that come with with the core patrons that are in the DCC books. So I'm really excited that we can bring that additional content as well. All right, so the next stretch goal, 70,000 more artifacts. So this is actually a really interesting one, because in DCC there's not like a magic item list right in the core books. So there's there's ways to create magic swords, magic potions, but every magic item is unique. And in DCC Dying Earth, that philosophy is sort of, we took that in interpretation, right? Everything is unique. However, we wanted to provide judges with the ability to essentially take whether they're artifacts or they're sort of science and magic blended together. But basically these heirlooms of ancient Earth that you can discover in your wanderings, in the Dying Earth. And so there are maybe 20 or so artifacts in the core book that vary from the ones we created or ones that are just specifically referenced, and kind of again sort of our interpretation of what the books are, including the more famous ones like the Ioun stones and the big ones that we have our own spin on. But this will give us a chance to add even more of those. So certainly these are ones that we're excited to, because I think artifacts and magic items are an area of DCC that's not really usually statted out, but we have an opportunity to do that with Dying Earth because of the kind of the way they tie into the story so much.
Right, rather than waiting for the adventures to introduce them into play.
Yeah, because so much about the Dying Earth setting is you are exploring all these ruins and sort of areas that it's completely possible to find like a magic item type artifact, like it happens to Kugel or happens to some of the other characters, and it's a really neat way of introducing that story into your setting. I know, Julian, you had like a few of these artifacts. I know that like this one was a particular writing challenge maybe for coming up with artifacts, because everything in DCC you want to have, you don't want it to be like of such a benefit without such a risk, right? That was what, so I know we had that conversation a lot, right? It can't just be a magic item that's like a something you can use and it automatically works every time.
Or Joseph once counseled me to put a friendly hand on my shoulder and said, they can't just be mean. They actually have to have a benefit too. And I said, oh yes, Dark One, you are right. So yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I kind of go maybe one direction and sometimes the other direction, but a nice balance is good, actually.
Yeah.
The risk is there. And most importantly, I don't think I wrote, I'm 100% sure I didn't write this one, but we do have the flying car from, it's in.
Emperor Bear.
Yes. That one, I'm not going to try to say that. But,
wow.
but
I impressed myself.
Who doesn't want their DCC Dying Earth character driving a flying car?
And on that point, Maseo13 asked if there would be a little bit of info about mixing Dying Earth with MCC. Marc, do you want to field that one? I know that we have some info on like bringing DCC characters into the world of Dying Earth.
Yeah, we didn't. So I think we don't have anything in the core books, to say explicitly using artifact checks or things like that, because we wanted MCC to be its own universe. However, the rules are certainly layered in such that you could take the MCC artifact rules and put them into the DCC Dying Earth. What we tried to do with the artifacts, which was a little bit different than MCC. Like, so with MCC, you get an artifact, you make an artifact check. That's sort of your ability that sort of like may prevent you from using it or may lead to catastrophe. But once you know the item, basically it's just recharging it, using it. There's not really any kind of like inherent use or risk to that technology. What we try to do in DCC Dying Earth, though, is that the items you find, there's always sort of this equipoise, right? There's this idea of a balance, right? It has good, but it also has a flavor of like I put it in terms of risk, even if it's marginal risk. And so really the artifact check is not necessarily needed in the setting where there's an inherent danger to using and exploring, right? Which is what the feeling that we want to get Dying Earth. So you could certainly use the MCC artifact checks, but they're not part of the core DCC Dying Earth rule settings.
And I think the other thing to remember about that is that although there is some technology, it's all viewed as magic anyway.
Right. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily it. I think that the chapters that explore technology, those are obviously some of the earlier works, and a lot of the later ones are much more heavily leaning towards magic. You, as a judge, you could choose to run it in a much more MCC style and fashion, and I think that's where you'd want to say, oh, I think I want to have like more technology flavor, but we give you enough tools in there to for some of those technologies, they're described more like magic in our sense, but you could use those things and have a very science-based feel to the game as well.
And it occurs to me that you could also even have unknown patches of Dying Earth where they are just MCC characters using MCC mechanics alongside Dying Earth characters using Dying Earth mechanics. I mean, so somebody may, Kugel would know how to use a talking book or whatever, but the MCC guys would have to make an artifact check, right? Because they're from they're 2 continents over from a Stone Age culture or whatever, and they're like, what the hell is that? So the rules can even dwell cheek by jowl, if you will.
All right, moving on to 80,000. So this one it's really just going to be a supplement that is going to help the judges. It's going to be a judges screen with designed to have ready access information, especially for some of the new rules. I think there's been some discussion about putting some fancy vocabulary in there. There's been some discussion about, what we put in the judges screen, but it's going to be a helpful use, guide and aid for judges to have at the table, just similar to the other judges screen that, DCC has and like Marc has. So this is going to be something that is given to all the Kickstarter backers. One thing that I think it's worth clearing up for anybody at different pledge levels is that everybody's going to get access to these stretch goals. If you're only doing a PDF pledge, you'll get a PDF version of these stretch goals. If you're doing a print pledge, you'll get both the print and the PDF version of the stretch goal. So these will be produced in a print version, but only the backers that are doing a print level will get the printed copies, if that makes sense. But everybody's going to get a copy of them, an electronic copy if you're only pledged at the PDF level, or both if you're pledged at the print level.
And I'm not sure where the judges screen lies on that. We had some questions about that during the Lankmar one, and I still wasn't clear on it.
Yeah, and
to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so hopefully it's something that we can provide, that just based on Joseph's guidance, that the PDF backers are going to get access to all the stretch goals. So hopefully that'll maintain for the things like the judges screen as well, even though it won't be a physical copy. I'm not sure the format. I see that question in chat. What we're going to end up with. I know that that'll probably be something that we'll debate in terms of like how much content we want to have in there. I don't know, Jen, what did they come up with for Lankmar in the end?
Almost all of the judges screens from the beginning have been trifold. I mean, I should say 3 panels, portrait orientation, and front and back have either information or art, for the players.
Yeah.
I would say, as opposed to some of the vocabulary, there's an entire Appendix V that will be included for players and judges alike. So you can go there for your vocabulary needs.
Yeah, rather than taking up maybe valuable real estate.
Yeah, there's a lot of new things going on that might be really helpful to have at the judges' fingertips for that.
Yes.
Right.
This is one of the best things that I'm really looking for, is having that screen. That's going to be excellent.
I can't wait to see the art.
And the art is going to be great.
That takes us to the next stretch goal of 90K, which is 100 adventure hooks. So this one is also previously cleared. So the idea here is that we want to provide seeds for your table, your game. That if it's maybe you're on in the middle of the campaign, but you want to have some exploration of an area that you weren't ready to run thing for. This would be a way for you to have access to like a ready-made list of creative ideas. So these will be short, descriptions, providing a judge with the variety of tools. And we may be basing this somewhat on like geographic locations, within the Dying Earth settings. That maybe one way we could organize it, so that if you're exploring in a certain area, you have, these 100 seeds, or it could just be, a list that provides you with, just adventure hooks based on theme, right? So I think there's, how we're going to approach this is still to be determined, but we want to make sure that the judges have the kind of the content, where they can reference something and then, build off it immediately, just enough information to do that. All right. The next one is 100K, another cleared goal. So
did we skip 90?
Oh, did I skip 90? That was 90K, the 100 adventure hooks.
Okay.
Maybe I'm didn't cover it. So we did judges screen at 80K. 90K is 100 adventure hooks. 100K is NPC statistics. So one of the things that we're excited about also is, back in when I was growing up and playing, the original D&D, having, the theme folio or the monster manual, and having like all the sort of like, characters from novels being statted out was always kind of a fun thing, because it's always this, fun mental exercise to compare and sort of like, compare your own, imagination against what some author did, but also compare across like genres, which is always a fun thing. So these will be NPC stats for certainly the major characters, the major elements in the novel, as well as some lesser or side characters, some of the fun ones that you can use to either drop in your campaign, or just have that sort of our interpretation of what these characters would be in our DCC setting.
So you can finally have Kugel fight the Mouser, right? I mean, maybe it might take Crawford and the Mouser. That'd be interesting.
Well, I have a question for you guys, Marc and Julian. With Fawford and Mouser, with the stories, you got to see them when they were first starting out, and then throughout their career, and then they're aged, and Fawford's missing an arm. Sorry, spoilers. So what we did in the Lankmar not supplement, that's the wrong word, setting book, was we included stats for all 3 phases of their careers. Would Kugel's ever really change?
No, there's not like this sort of drawn out time period where you could say this is a different sort of physical person, right? So I would imagine that's not something that we would want, that's not needed in this setting. So I think that would be.
Thank you.
And does any? I mean, he's awfully lucky and resilient in those 2 books, but does anybody really think he gets past 40? I mean, not really.
Well, that's a fair question.
Yeah.
What do you do with a magician who lives centuries or eons? You know, which time period do you pick with that? You know, Rialto and you know, those are, you know, they tend to live millions of years, you know, and perhaps longer. So
But yeah, we would definitely include the stats for pretty much all of the titular characters within the first book.
Yeah.
You know, Turgeon, Gael of Sphere, Sais, one of my favorites.
Yeah. Those would be fun to have access to, and we'll probably just do one version of each of them. So
that would, yeah, thank you.
All right, moving on to the $110,000 stretch goal, which is the last of the originally announced stretch goals. So this is monster ecology and layers. And so what we're trying to do here is take the, you know, the monster descriptions that we have in the book, and for some of the monsters, expand on, you know, what essentially their home lair would be. You know, think the ghoul bear in the Dying Earth novels, where there's a really kind of rich description of the encounter, you know, with that lair, how they have, you know, how it has captives that are sort of like, you know, hanging in these cages, and that is the idea that we're trying to present, and for different types of the monsters, so that it's almost like a mini location setting that you could use for a particular encounter with a monster. You know, what does their home lair look like when you encounter it in the sort of their native environment?
Like the Murids and the Gru.
Yeah, where's the Gru? Where does the Gru live? So that's an exciting one, because I think that's an area for us to kind of really explore, like I said, more providing like a mini setting for campaigns and judges to use.
Are we thinking maps, Mark?
You know, I don't think there's in this particular one, I don't think there's maps, because it might be like a cave dwelling or like a ruins, but I wouldn't think that there would be like a lot of mapping. Maybe a small map you could be a part of that, but I think those we could save for some of the later stretch goals that we're going to talk about. Possible maps.
But it's pretty good for sandboxing, because if you discover the ghoul bear and they track it back, the ref can then pull out the, well, you know.
Yeah, here's the typical ghoul bear, you know, cave dwelling that it resides in. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so those are all the stretch goals that have been announced, and, you know, part of the Kickstarter that everybody knows about. What we're going to get into now are the new stretch goals. Most of these, I will say, have been already cleared, thanks to all of you and your support for this project. So I really appreciate that. The first one that we're going to talk about is at the $120,000 level, which is the supplemental art folio. So I think this is going to be something that has been requested a lot in the comments. This is going to be a standalone, or you know, it's going to be printed material, but it's going to be, you know, essentially a folio of the artwork of Dying Earth that is going to showcase, you know, the artists like Doug Kovacs or St. Julian or Errol Otis, and really try to, you know, present the art without any, you know, of the overlays, without any of the text, just so it can be, you know, part of your collection. So how this is going to be printed in the format, that's still to be worked out, but we want to make sure there was an art folio as one of the stretch goals based on all the feedback that we got. The next stretch goal, so at the 130,000 level, similarly, what we wanted to do was present a folio of the Sandistones and demons. So these are two important sort of wizardly helpers, right? The Sandistones for magicians, the demons for witches. And so the idea here is that we are going to create sort of, you know, a folio of, you know, demons and Sandistones that you can have as a ready-made player, you know, hand out players, but also hopefully include some really cool art with them as well of these creations, these magical creations, you know, or magical creatures, you know, that also kind of bring what they represent to life. So this is going to be, you know, something that, you know, we'll stat out a few of these, and, you know, you can include, and it'll be given to players, right, you know, as part of a launch into, you know, the familiars essentially for both of those classes.
And hopefully with art. Hopefully.
Because there's a lot of cool things that can be done with both of these as far as arts and coming up with creature designs for them. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
The demons could possibly even be used for a demon summoning result.
Exactly. That's how the witch would access it. It would be, demons that they would summon, as part of their demon summoning skill, and potentially, bind to their will with some of the higher results, right? So the demons would be particularly exciting, especially there's a lot of rich demon descriptions in the Vance novels as well. All right, the next stretch goal at the $140,000 level is going to be a booklet of magician manses. So if you're familiar with the Vance novels, the manses are these kind of edifices that every magician is kind of proud of and envious of their fellow association members. And so each manse is unique. Each manse has its own sort of flavor for the magician that created it. Each is also sort of like its own sort of weird representation of magic and maybe even twisted magic in some ways. Some manses that we've come up with in our own play tests have been made out of weird materials, or they are they defy the laws of physics. So we are going to present a book of magician manses, and these could be explored or part of a campaign setting, or just examples that you could also take as a blueprint and say, I want to build something like this when my magician levels up and starts building their manse. So this will be a booklet of these for players and judges to use. So I'm excited about this one as well.
Yes, and obviously that's a place where your characters are going to end up over and over and over again. So
yeah.
It's going to be really useful.
Yeah, especially if they're delving for artifacts and stealing from those magicians who may or may not be out of town when they're knocking on the door. Right, the next stretch goal, the $150,000 level, is a book of spell librams. So when you are a starting character and you are a first level magician, one of the things that you're given essentially is a starting libram of spells that you have access to. So this is actually an idea where we wanted to print out in a nice way, a libram for you to give to your players as a judge. There's a random table that you roll on to say, which libram do I start with? So everybody has access to a variety of different librams, and so we're going to print out these so that they're available for distribution to your players. And Jen, this was actually one of your ideas, I think, in terms of stretch goals, just because it's so useful as a player and judge aid.
Yes, exactly. And since we have a finite number of them that are preset, because it's the magic that you've learned from your prior instructor, you're going to start with one of these books. So why not have them ready? Yeah. And that's something that I've been kind of talking behind the scenes with John Marr of Purple Sorcerer about as well. So we're hoping to get a little bit of additional support on that end.
Awesome.
I'm excited.
All right, so the next stretch goal is going to be at $160,000. It's going to be additional wizardly objurgations. And so to explain the background on this one a little bit, wizardly objurgation is the concept that whoever created the spell, there's these kind of grand, masters of magic that lived in the the prior aeons, who created the magic that the magicians know and kind of memorize today. Well, using that magic comes with its own risk, because you may be essentially incurring the sort of the wrath of a prior creator if you use it. Sort of like the idea of a spell failure, right? So wizardly objurgations are this kind of concept of a the personal imprint of spell failure that these magicians of old have bound into the very fabric of their spells. There's a generic wizardly objurgation table in the core book, so similar to the generic spell burn or generic sort of misfire results. That table is accessible for judges to roll on to say, okay, when you got wizardly objurgation, this is what happens. What we're going to be doing is actually creating tables specific to the great magicians of old. Fandel the Great will have his own objurgation table. Pandaloon will have his own objurgation table. So these will be sort of building on the concept of magic is this thing that was created once and then handed down to the future, and all the current magicians are basically just trying to access and discover what was written before, but it's imparted with these creators' essence. So the objugation is going to be essentially taking that concept and extending it to the individuals, great musicians that created the spells in the first place. All right, so the next stretch goal, 170,000. This is where we get into some exciting material. This one's also already cleared. Thank you very much. We are going to start producing some location guides. So think of these as supplements that are specific to detailing out an area of the Dying Earth that you want to play in. The first one of these is the Museum of Man location guide. So this is going to be essentially like an adventure-linked supplement or module-linked supplement that's going to detail out that location, including
battery 70%.
Creatures that you would encounter there, potentially NPCs, also just new areas that we come up with. But this one is going to be the Museum of Man, which is the location that that Gaiul goes to with to encounter the Bernick, the demon, and they sort of have that really fun encounter where they're unwinding the demon and sort of like storing it on these weird technology tapes, and eventually the whole demon is unwound on the spool like a big ball of yarn. So that's a location that we're going to start with as far as one of our location settings. The next one is at another cleared goal, which is 185,000. Another location guide. This will be Cain, the White City. So again, another sort of like big location. It's a city of decaying city, that's half ruins, half sort of populated by this sort of grotesque menagerie of people and things that just have gathered there at the end of the world. And so this is a really rich setting. The city is like is one of the only cities that's really described fully in a lot of detail in the books. And so this is going to be where we have like Prince Candive and his court and his palace, along with some of the the miners, and including Chun the Unavoidable, right, which is another part of Cain that's explored with the Leon of the Wayfarer section. So this is where we also have an opportunity to really take those NPCs and bring them and put them into the setting. So again, another adventure link supplement that'll be detailing out that particular location.
So you finally get your Chun the Unavoidable for all the Chun fans out there, because we get that question a lot, and the question is unavoidable. We get it. So now you know.
And we've cleared the stretch goal, so it's guaranteed to come.
Excellent.
All right. So looking at our Kickstarter, I don't think we've quite cleared these next few stretch goals. We're close to breaking it. 200,000. So I think we're right on the edge of breaking this one.
We're less than 24. We're 2405 off of this one. Come on, guys. We want this one.
This is where we're going to add a new adventure. So a completely new adventure, in addition to the 6 that are being produced as part of the Kickstarter, that'll be part of the core box set. We're going to start with the first new adventure is called I think title is to be determined, but it's the working title is The Great Visp Hunt, although that's a great title, so I'm not sure that we're going to but I'm
not sure that translates very well over text or I'm sorry, audio. That's Visp, V-I-S-P.
So Julian, this is going to be written by Julian. It's one that he's actually playtested before as part of previous Dying Earth playtests, and it's kind of a fun setting to introduce the characters to the wilderness and the idea of one of the unique creatures that's part of the Dying Earth novels.
Yes, exactly what you said. Plus a look at the wilderness and the Vancian villages that inhabit them, and the sort of weird symbiosis that occurs between some of the villages and the denizens of the wilderness around them. I ran it 3 or 4 times last year, maybe 3 times at conventions with an additional little table playtest, and had a lot of fun. So really looking forward to writing that up.
Cool. Yeah, and this is we wanted to include new adventures because there's so many places in Dying Earth that you could explore, and with the 6 adventures that we originally created, we only had an opportunity to do a little bit of the settings. the ideas that we came up with for the new adventures are really based on what else, do we want to explore in the rest of the novels. And the wilderness setting is like a big part of the novels, and having a wilderness adventure and kind of like more of a, a little bit more of a free form in the sense of, that exploration is really fun, because that's so much of what, the journeys between cities, the journeys, to destinations is a lot of part of the novels.
Yeah, and this one is almost, maybe it could be a substantial side quest, but you could, between the two major pieces of it, you could introduce a bunch of stuff from the encounter hooks, or you could put a magician's manse in there, or at the end, or whatever. So a lot of this stuff starts to get really modular when you get into monster layers and locations and manses and some of the adventures. So that could be pretty sandboxy and really let people go their own way, and let people choose their own death. I think that's what we're saying.
Yep. Choose your own death at the end of the world. So.
Yes, exactly.
I did see a question in chat about adventures probably having additional monsters. That's correct. So just like any DCC module, the authors typically come up with like a new creature, and it's only in that adventure. And that's, a lot of our DCC Dying Earth adventures are very similar to that. All right, the next stretch goal, this is at the $210,000 level. Another location guide. So this is Jenk, the world of the Archfields. So this is a world that the magicians in Rialto's time travel to in search of, the Ioun stones and, Morian. And this is the idea of the world of the Archfields was a very intriguing place. And so we wanted to create a location guide specific to that, especially since, the majority of the novels take place on the Earth itself, but there's this idea of traveling to other worlds, and the magicians seem to do it easily, right? There's, create a whole floating castle and go travel to, across time and space. And so the idea here is that we want to create this sense of, it's not just the Earth, but it's also exploring other worlds, and for putting the seeds out there for those ideas as well. And one of those worlds is the worlds of the Archfields. All right, the next stretch goal, the $220,000, is our final location guide, which I'm going to let Jen pronounce this.
Emperor Datfir.
Emperor Datfir. So we wanted to provide a really detailed setting guide for Emperor Datfir, which is obviously one of those iconic places in the Dying Earth novels. This is an opportunity for us to really blend that science and magic component that Julian was talking about earlier. Not just the things that are in the novels, but also what else could be found in that ruined city, and what time period is it going to be in? Is it going to be, before it was destroyed by, Rogel Dominantfries, or is it going to be, some sort of blend of that, kind of giving options to judges? So this is kind of a fun place, because I think for me, it's really one of the most iconic settings that I remember from the books, and really stands out to me.
Yeah, the towering metal spires and everything. Yeah, it was definitely one of the most visually enticing.
All right, the last two stretch goals are going to be a little bit of a just placeholders until as we work out exactly what they're going to contain. But starting with the $235,000 level, this is going to be another new adventure. So we're going to be adding a second adventure with our stretch goals. This is going to be another, adventure length. It's going to be, 16 pages of, of a complete adventure. Some of the subjects that we're thinking about exploring, and yes, obviously, if you have a favorite place that you want to see, please get that in the comments, right? In terms of, the Kickstarter comments, because we want to, obviously bring some of your feedback into our process. But one of the areas that we've been talking about is this idea of ghosts and the ghost, haunted places in the Dying Earth. That's a big part of the novels that, we don't really have like a place in our current adventures for. And so that's an area that we think of, we were going to create an adventure around, is like sort of the idea of exploring, these kind of ghostly cities or ghostly places, and making that kind of a fun adventure. Similarly, our last stretch goal that we're going to announce tonight is at the $250,000 level, which would be an amazing amount of funding to reach. Given where our trajectory, I think this is certainly something where we may have to start thinking of more stretch goals at this point, but it's going to be another new adventure. So this will be a third adventure as part of stretch goals. It'll bring our total adventures up to 9 adventures for the setting. So the 6 that come with the core module and the 3 that are Kickstarter exclusives. So you will, as a judge and a player, have a rich foundation for exploring Dying Earth with 9 adventures. So we're really excited that if we get to that level, we'll have a big library, at your, for you to access and play and hopefully enjoy, as you explore the Dying Earth. So that's on my end. I'm certainly really excited about these stretch goals. I'm a little daunted by the word count that I see when I start adding all these. But I mean, I'm really super excited that Joseph is, wants to give back to the backers, all these extras, as part of your participation in the Kickstarter, and really excited that we keep getting good feedback in terms of like things and ideas that we could bring. If we, I'm sure if we could start getting to that level where we're going to clear the 250,000, we've already got some other ideas of beyond that. What do we do? But we're going to leave it at 250,000 for now, and hopefully start progressing towards that stretch goal so we can get everything in this list to you as part of the backers for the Kickstarter.
And remember, guys, swag is swag. Swag is not. In the past, for those of you who have been fans of DCC going back about 6 or 8 years, there have been Kickstarters for DCC swag. This is not one of them. This is solely about content. There will be some sort of swag. It may depend on, the contracts are always written out funny. We don't know what the licensing contains. And that is for the Dark Master to decide. And, go ahead and put it in your Kickstarter comments that you'd like to see more of it. And it'll be up to the powers that be.
And remember, since we're coming right up on my stretch goal, Grandma needs a Dying Earth. If you got a newborn cousin or something, these kids need I mean, who doesn't like a little Dying Earth, a complete box set and the whole 9 yards? So just saying, don't do anything intemperate. Don't mortgage the house. Don't sell the car. Don't,
don't go to Vegas for it,
No, don't go to Vegas, and don't go to Rocco for it. But well, enough said.
There are over 2,000 backers already, which means there are over 2,000 awesome people in this world.
Yes, and the outpouring of support here has been terrific.
I'm stunned. I think all of us are stunned by the support that we received, and just so grateful that you guys are giving us this opportunity, and we're really excited about bringing more content back to you guys.
I will say that I'm not surprised by the passion, because having done some of the play testing, I could see how excited people were for Jack Vance and Dying Earth, and they were really, really excited to get in there and do it and test it and kick the tires and just have fun doing it. But we didn't know how big a group it was necessarily, right? But it's it's pretty substantial, and it's great to see that, because it's such great stuff. It's great to see there's so many passionate Jack Vance fans who are looking forward to this. So that's really great, because he's terrific.
Which allows me to segue into an announcement for next weekend. A lot of you have seen that the Sanctum Secorum will be holding a reading room live podcast here next Saturday evening on this Twitch channel. However, we have a new edition of the Sanctum Secorum live podcast, which will be on Sunday afternoon, just prior to Blades Against Bandwidth, if I have my timing correct. And for that, we will be joined by very, very special guests, John Vance and his wonderful person from the Spatterlight Publishing, Kuhn, and I can't pretend to pronounce your last name, sir, so I'm sorry. But yeah, we're gonna have Mr. Vance's kid here with us, and I'm just a little squibbly. But I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I really look forward to discussing the Dying Earth works with him, and maybe getting a sneak preview at some of the pronunciations as intended versus as everybody reads them.
Yeah, that's actually really. I mean, we've got to get MP3s of that or something so that.
Both of them will be released as audio versions of the podcast via sanctum.media.
Is it
They are podcast. Pardon me?
Fallenense or is it Fallenense?
Pronunciations. We're just gonna. It's gonna be an hour of us just quizzing, just like.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll be okay with that too. I don't know.
They'll probably still be very impressed with Jen's Ampradavir. They'll probably. I mean,
it's like Melnibone, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm super excited to meet John Vance. He's been somebody we've corresponded with over email, and has, Joseph has been giving him, versions of the manuscript and getting feedback and things like that. So I'm super excited that he's participating with us, as part of our kind of Sanctum support for this project. And, it's super excited, but also super nervous about that.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the key word for next weekend is Spatterlight. That'll be our code word. There has been an extra question in the Twitch chat, just to try to address that in live time, from JJ Chodes. I think you may have missed Marc's explanation of the exclusives being available depending on the level at which you have pledged.
Yes. So the general guidance is, if you're pledging at an electronic level only, so if you're only a backer that's getting PDFs, you will receive a PDF version of these Kickstarter stretch goals. If you're backing at a level that includes print, copies of the box set, you'll be getting the print and PDF versions of these stretch goals. So depending on what level you are, you'll either get an electronic version if your pledge is at the PDF level, and if you're at the print level, you'll get the print copy plus the PDF copy of the stretch goals. And they will be produced as a separate set of booklets or booklet, depending on how we do the printing, apart from the core 3 books that make up the retail box set. And these will be Kickstarter exclusive for people who back the Kickstarter.
Well, there was talk about the initial adventures, numbers 0 through 5, also being exclusive to a point, and that they might have the telltale foil titles on them.
I don't know. That's a question that I don't think the 3 of us might answer.
Just some hubbub going on.
So there may be
some talk in the comments.
There's some extra special things that Kickstarter backers get, even for the core stuff, right? Even for the
on the Kickstarter page, copies with Kickstarter exclusive foil title printings.
I heard there's going to be a gold doubloon in each adventure. Is it true?
Absolutely not, because they'd be terces.
Yes, there will be a cardboard.
Golden centums, I think, is the highest value. So we'll do golden centums.
A little cutout of with Prince Candice's face on one, and then
I think what we need next are grudge tokens. I mean, we got some fleeting luck tokens out of Blankmar. Come on.
I know, yeah. I think that's gonna be something that if we start knocking down the stretch goals, that's something to look at. So
yeah, and it would be pretty cool to see what Doug comes up with for a grudge token design. They may not be poker chips. I mean, he may not even be thinking in a traditional way
Wow.
But they would have kittens.
That hurts my head.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, the stretch goal will be posted tomorrow, I think, in terms of the updated graphic. So, you'll match essentially what you've been seeing on the Twitch stream. Thank you all for your patience as we've, had to wait for this. There was obviously a lot of discussion about, what the right stretch goals were, making sure that, we got some feedback from the comments, but also, had an opportunity to really unveil them and hopefully, get everybody informed about them at the same time. And so please continue to give us your feedback. Obviously, one of the things that we didn't anticipate so much was that we would clear so many of the new stretch goals even before we announced them. So that's super exciting. But you continue to provide your feedback, and really excited to give you these new stretch goals and additions, and like I said, very content focused, which is where we really want you guys to be getting the value out of the Kickstarter.
And the only thing I have to add to that is keep your eyes on either the Kickstarter or the Goodman Games page website for their news blast of when each new little segment related to Dying Earth is going to hit the Twitch channel.
Well, awesome. Thank you all so much. And I'm really looking forward to the continuing success of the Kickstarter. All right.
And have a great and safe weekend.